We are less than a week away from the Game Week 1 deadline, and the Community Shield has answered a lot of our FPL questions, but also given us a lot of headaches. So in this video, I'm going to tell you everything that we learned from that Man City Arsenal game. So make sure you do drop a like on this video. Make sure you smash that subscribe button. We're aiming for 7k before that Game Week 1 deadline. So without further ado, let's get into this video. So first up, we need to talk about the starting lineups for both teams. And kicking off with Man City, we saw Ortega replace Ederson in goal. Now, this is common in these sort of games, so I wouldn't panic Ederson owners. I do expect Ederson to start in Game Week 1. But what was very interesting from Pep was actually the change of system that they had. We have been seeing them play with the back three and the two midfielders, which were Stones and Rodri at the back end of last year. But we actually saw a flat four from them with Akanji playing at the left back and Walker at right back with Stones and Diaz as centre backs. And they didn't actually move away from this formation. Both Rodri and Kovacic were acting as a double pivot in the build-up, and the fullbacks actually offering the width. So no inverted John Stones into midfield, which is a big talking point. The other big things, Grealish playing off the left, Alvarez playing in what looks like the 10, but actually was almost like a second forward in the team. Bernardo Silva off the right, and Haaland, of course, playing as a striker. No room for Phil Foden in the starting 11. Arsenal, on the other hand, exactly what we would expect from them in terms of the setup. The back four of White, Saliba, Gabriel, and Timber in Zinchenko's absence. Rice and Partey acting as a kind of double pivot in out of possession situations. Odegaard, Saka and Martinelli. But importantly, Havertz replacing Gabriel Jesus as the starting 9. No Nketiah, no Trossard as a false 9. Havertz actually getting the nod, which is really interesting when we are looking forward towards that Game Week 1 deadline. Maybe Havertz is an option for our teams. Now, of course, there was substitutions along the way in this game. We will touch on those, but that is how the general starting 11s looked for both teams. So to give us a bit more of an understanding on how Man City set up, here is their average positions during the game. These are for the starting players. I will come on to the players that came off the bench. So the important thing here is no inverted fullbacks. We can see here with the 25 being Akanji and 2 being Walker. These guys didn't really come into those centre mid roles, and Stones and Diaz very much playing as centre back. So from an FPL perspective, we're getting very, very default positions here. We're not seeing Stones pick up those centre mid roles, but again, we need to talk about later whether this is going to be a unique formation for the Arsenal game, or is this actually something that is going to be continuing forward? Kovacic and Rodri in that double pivot for the build-up. We can see that in their positions here. They very much were receiving the ball, trying to get things going, whereas we would have seen Stones in that sort of position during last season. Alvarez playing as a second forward. Again, this is super important from an FPL perspective. We can see him here there, number 19, playing a little bit higher than Haaland actually in this role. He was very much playing alongside him or just slightly behind him in build-up phases. But from an attacking perspective, good things from Alvarez in particular. Haaland really unable to get into the game. We can see that wasn't his usual self, being kind of the last man in the team stretching the game. Just didn't get those opportunities with both Saliba and Gabriel being fantastic. He had to come into those areas to try and build up play, but really just didn't do anything throughout the entire game. And Grealish maintaining that high position, lacked a lot of goal threat, but he was their kind of outlet on that left-hand side. But kind of the usual things we expect. Him taking a lot of touches, sideways passes, trying to beat his man from time to time, but wasn't really getting a lot of success in the game. But that is the average positions there. As I said, go into a bit more of a 4-back, which isn't very good from an FPL perspective because we know the fullbacks offer nothing in this Man City team. And if Stones is playing as an actual centre-back, then I start to question whether he is a good FPL option or not. But let's have a look at how the subs impacted this game. So in the second half, we saw a few changes with Pep's substitutions and also a way of them playing, it is worth noting. So we saw Haaland go off, Alvarez went up as the number 9, Kevin De Bruyne came on and played as that Alvarez role. But we can see with the touch heat map here, number 17, the average position for De Bruyne, he was really driving this team forward when he did come onto the field. We saw Bernardo Silva go into the double pivot alongside Rodri. And then we also saw Foden come on for Jack Grealish on the left-hand side. But there's a few slight tweaks that Pep done in the second half. We saw the fullbacks go really wide. And instead of having the double pivot of Rodri and Kovacic kind of building up the play, we actually saw one of the centre mids drop into the defence. A lot of the time that was someone like Bernardo Silva or a Rodri. And then because Akanji was hogging the touchline, we saw Foden come in off the flank and into those left centre mid roles. So even though he replaced Jack Grealish, he wasn't actually playing as a high winger. And you can see that with his touch heat map there. Number 47. He isn't really wide. He actually was able to operate in those left centre mid roles because of the way that Pep kind of put out his fullbacks in that second half. So it is worth noting that. And as I said, De Bruyne played as that second forward alongside Alvarez. Cole Palmer picking up some really nice positions. The number 80 on your screens there. But again, not really an FPL option. But what I'm reading into this is Foden is a minutes risk, we know that, but he picked up some really nice inside midfield positions rather than a winger, which is very, very promising from an FPL perspective. So I wanted to deep dive into a couple of the FPL options that we definitely are considering for our teams, and one of those is John Stones as a 5.5 million defender. I think we've all put him into our Game Week 1 teams on the premise that he is playing as a centre mid in this Man City team. Played 90 minutes, one shot, but the big problem with this Community Shield game was he played specifically as a centre-back in a flat back four. We didn't see him invert into the midfield as they had Bernardo Silva and Kovacic play as double pivots alongside Rodri. So the big question here is, was this specific for Arsenal, or is this another iteration of Pep that he's going to go into this season? My assumption right now, because of the signing of Gvardiol and just because it was Arsenal, I think they will continue to play their 3-2 build-up system. And I think we will see John Stones play in that centre mid role alongside Rodri. But my big worry is Kovacic played well, really well in that system. And I think he can play alongside Rodri. And I think that is going to definitely be a system that Pep will look to deploy going forward. And because of that reason, I am a little bit put off by John Stones now. If he plays as a centre-back, I don't want him at 5.5. And because of that very reason, and because Kovacic played really well in there, and Bernardo Silva, we know, can do a brilliant job in that double pivot, I'm starting to move away from John Stones as a option just because of what we saw in this Community Shield game. But let me know your thoughts. Now, one player that definitely stood out and has now put himself on the shop market is Julian Alvarez, who I mentioned played in that second forward role alongside Erling Haaland, picking up some really nice positions. You can see that on the touch heat map here. He played the full 90 minutes. And as I said, when Haaland left the field, he went and replaced him as the number 9. He had one shot, 3 key passes. But the big question is, 6.5 million, can we punt on Alvarez as an option, being a forward in our teams? A lot of us are going for Haaland, which is pretty much essential, even though he had a terrible game, it is worth noting. A lot of us want to go for the 8 million in Watkins or the 7.5 in Kunku, but could we come down all the way to a Julian Alvarez with the assumption that he is going to start the season in that kind of number 8 left-hand side role? I think it is definitely something that we need to start considering for our teams. Is it a risk? I really think it is a risk for our teams. And is it worth doing? That's the big question. But if he picks up these positions here, plays as that second forward, I think he is going to be an unbelievable differential for our teams. Will I take that risk? Probably not. I think I want to go for the more safer picks in Nkunku, Nicholas Jackson if they are past fit. But if Alvarez starts game week 1, I'm expecting a real quick bandwagon on him. So let me know in the comments, is Alvarez a temptation for you? Because I think he is going to be for a lot of managers. And last up, we need to talk about Phil Foden because he has been the popular Man City asset outside of Erling Haaland coming into this pre-season. As I said, he played the last 30 minutes. He replaced Jack Grealish, but didn't actually replace him from a positional perspective. As I mentioned, Akanji gave that width in this Man City team, and Foden was able to come into those half spaces in midfield, picked up the ball, and we saw that when he did create that goal for Man City on the half turn, driving through the centre of the field and creating that opportunity for Cole Palmer, which he did dispatch. Now, the big question here is, can we take a punt on Phil Foden when he didn't start this game and is a massive minutes risk? And I think the answer is no. I really don't think we can go into game week 1 off the back of this game with the confidence that Phil Foden is going to start when we saw Alvarez play brilliant in that role. We saw the double pivot of Rodri and Kovacic. So does that mean that Foden kind of has less positions to occupy? Because we thought Kovacic may be the higher left side of centre mid role. But if he's going to be the deeper one, then it's just really, really difficult for us to understand whether Foden is going to break into this team. I think Grealish is important for this team, the way that he actually dictates tempo on that left wing. So because of that reason, I think Phil Foden is absolutely going to find a way into our teams eventually. But because of this Community Shield game, I think I'm going to avoid him for game week 1. I think at 7.5 million, we can go to safer picks like a James Maddison if we want to. Because of that reason, I think he's going to be an avoid. Let me know your thoughts. Right then, moving into this Arsenal team, and we have the average positions here for us. So a few talking points here. Havertz did start as the forward in the absence of Gabriel Jesus, and we can see him as the number 29 on your screens there. And this is always the case with Arsenal systems. If they play Trossard, if they play Jesus, if they play Havertz, they are not going to be the highest player in this system. The only time we might see that is if Enquiries plays for Arsenal. And we can see Saka, number 7, and Martinelli, number 11, be a much higher, well, I say much higher than that of Havertz, who came in to link up the play. Rice and Partey played as a double pivot when they were out of possession, very much a 4-4-2 from Arsenal, but we did see them revert to a 4-3-3 with Rice kind of going into that left-sided midfield position, picking up those kind of trademark roles that you saw from West Ham, driving the ball down the left flank with Thomas Partey acting as the anchor, but again a 4-4-2 out of possession. And the big talking point here is Martinelli did get replaced by Trossard around the 75-minute mark. Trossard didn't come on for Havertz, didn't come on for the likes of Declan Rice in that left-sided mid. It was specifically for Martinelli. And that does start to pose the question, is Martinelli's minutes a little bit of a risk? It's also worth noting here from the system, we didn't necessarily see any inverted fullbacks from Arsenal necessarily. Timber was the one, if there ever was a time to do it, he was the one that acted on it at left back. And I think he is a little bit of an interesting differential if you want to go down that route at 5 million. He could be a nice alternative to Gabriel and Saliba. But again, with Tierney taking some minutes away from Timber at the end of that game, could we see Timber's minutes a little bit managed from time to time? And especially if Zinchenko returns at the early part of the season, we might see Timber's minutes a little bit at risk. So I like Timber as a differential, but I do think Gabriel and Saliba are still solid minutes picks if you just want to go down that safe route. So with that injury to Gabriel Jesus, the whole talking point going into this Community Shield has been what Arsenal asset to go for in replacement for him. The common trio was Gabriel, Saka and Jesus. Now I think a lot of FPL managers are doing Gabriel, Saka and one other midfielder. Now I want to compare the popular three here. As I mentioned, Saka is the massive overall pick in ownership right now. And these numbers and touch heat map kind of justify it. We saw him pick up those trademark positions, but also penalty box touches. And you can see here, he played the full 90. He had 2 shots and 3 key passes. And when we compare that to both Martinelli and Odegaard, he was dominant in that attacking display. Odegaard played the full 90, but had 0 shots and 0 key passes. And Martinelli had 75 minutes and had 0 shots and 0 key passes. So not the best from an attacking perspective from both Martinelli and Odegaard. But this here just kind of cements the thought that Saka is by far and away the best Arsenal midfielder. I know it's only one game sample size, but I just think Saka is such a fantastic player. We also chuck onto the fact that he's on penalties. And for me, this just absolutely guarantees that he's the top pick. When it comes down to Martinelli and Odegaard, we can see here that the touches from Martinelli are a lot more attacking, much more box touches, whereas Odegaard is operating in that kind of right-sided mid-role, being the chief creator in that position. But we know that this is where he was last season and still managed to pick up double-digit returns in attacking goals and assists. Martinelli, on the other hand, was looking to stretch the game at every opportunity that he could. But again, when he's up against someone like a Kyle Walker, it's a very unique game. So I don't want to read too much into it in that situation. And he also was on corners as well, Martinelli, which is worth noting. But based on this midfield comparison for me, I think Saka is absolutely locked in. I think from a kind of attacking perspective, I want Martinelli. But from a minutes perspective, I think Martin Odegaard is the route to go for. I think Trossard is going to steal some minutes from Martinelli, but I always want to chase that upside. So I think Martinelli is the pick if you want to go for double midfield. But one man that is throwing his name in the hat is going to be Kai Havertz, who I mentioned did take the forward position away from Gabriel Jesus in his absence. He played 87 minutes. He had 2 shots, missed that one big chance that he did get a lot of grief over on social media. And as a Chelsea fan, I had a little chuckle on that one. But I don't care about that big chance miss, because even though I do think he's a poor finisher, he's still getting into those positions against one of the best teams in the league. So I think it was a really promising showing from Havertz. He linked the play well, found good pockets of space to actually collect the ball and receive. And I don't think it was actually a bad performance from Kai Havertz at all. I actually think it was quite promising and enough to make me think that Havertz could start the season as the number 9. The fact that Trossard come on and replace Martinelli, for me, suggests that Trossard isn't going to be a false 9 at all in this system. And with Enquiries only come on for the last 9 minutes, I think Havertz starts as the forward in game week 1. Now, at 0.5 million cheaper than Martinelli, a million cheaper than both Saka and Odegaard, we need to ask ourselves, is Kai Havertz a bit of a differential for us to consider going into game week 1? And I actually think I'm more bullish on this than what I was previously. I can envisage Arsenal starting the season with him down the middle, Martinelli off the left, Saka off the right, and that midfield three that we saw against Man City. So I really think it is actually a consideration we need to have for ourselves. Now, is he going to get managed from time to time? Potentially, but for me, Trossard has more chance of stealing minutes maybe off Martinelli or even off someone like a Partey or a Rice and him coming into that number 8 role while Gabriel Jesus is out. So I'm not sitting here telling you that Havertz is better than Martinelli, but I think if you really are one of those FPL managers that needs to go differential, doesn't want to go for the high ownership picks, then what I saw in this Community Shield game, I honestly think Havertz is now an option for our FPL teams. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. So finally, the conclusions of what I have drawn up from this game. First and foremost, Pep is doing Pep things. I do not know whether this formation is something that he is going to stick with or he is going to just do singly for this Arsenal game. I'm not reading too much into it. I think they still will play with that back three, with the 2 in front, with the build-up phases. But because of that reason, I am now put off on John Stones. I just cannot guarantee that he is going to be one of those that inverts into the midfield. Just because Kovacic played so well, I just can't guarantee it. And because of that reason, I'm now more off Stones than for him. Foden's minutes are a risk. I think he's an avoid. It kills me because I want to start with him so bad. But what we saw in the Community Shield, I just think Foden is too much of a risk for our teams. One player that is a consideration is now Alvarez. I think his minutes, again, are a risk. But if you want to go down that differential route, if you're not sold on the 8 million forwards, the 7.5 millions, maybe the choice for you is just to go for Alvarez and hope that in the first 3 fixtures, he gets considerable minutes in 2 of those. And that might be enough for you to get some huge FPL returns. Haaland was poor. He was really poor, but he's still essential. Do not read anything into that game. I do think the combination of Saliba, Gabriel with a double pivot of Partey and Rice is as good as it's going to get in the league this season. Timber is an option, but I do prefer Gabriel and Saliba, just I think as safer picks. I think Timber later down the line is either going to be the right back or he is going to get shared minutes off the left. I think he's too good not to start though, but I'll probably avoid him right now. Saka, absolutely essential, just too damn good. I don't think you can go without him. But the third Arsenal pick is now a tough call. Previously, I was all in on a Martinelli. I think I will start the season with Martinelli, but I think Havertz is putting his hand up as a little bit of a differential punt if you want to go down that route. But again, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Yes, guys, okay, that is going to wrap up today's video. It's a little bit longer, but I hope you have drawn some FPL conclusions from this little bit of deep dive that we saw in the Community Shield. All that leaves me to say is thank you so much for subscribing during this preseason. If you haven't already, please do consider smash that subscribe button, drop a like on the video, and make sure you do check out our most recent video, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Cheers.